Welcome to the Power of Your Mind podcast. I'm Victoria Gallagher, your host. Have you been attempting to use law of attraction or hypnosis to attract financial abundance, a soulmate, or career success? Would you like to be happy, motivated, and successful? Have better health, enjoy more fulfilling relationships, overcome struggle, and gain mastery over your life? Then join me on this amazing self-help podcast where you'll unleash the power of your mind. I'll be sharing 20 years of wisdom and techniques of hypnotherapy, law of attraction, visualization, meditation, personal growth, positive affirmations, and other effective methods to help you tap into the great power which resides in your mind and become the best version of yourself. Welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 68. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction coach and #1 best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction, Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, founder of HipTalk.com, HypnoCloud apps, and so be sure to stop by HipTalk.com and sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course. And for our listeners who found us through Power of Your Mind podcast, you can get 35% off your first order of downloads when you apply the code podcast to your shopping cart. And also be sure to download the latest HypnoCloud app in the iTunes store. So today I have a very special guest with me, Kaz Riley. Kaz Riley is an international speaker and trainer who has a degree in applied biology, worked in sales and marketing for Viagra for 10 years, is and has been a full-time hypnotherapist for 16 years and more. She is the host of Trancing in the Sheets, a vlog show on the Hypnosis 24/7 Live network, and the founder of Sexual Freedom Hypnosis. Today, Kaz is going to share some of her insights about harnessing the power of your mind by finding your sexual freedom. So welcome to the show, Kaz.
Thanks for having me, Victoria.
Thanks for being here. So you're going to be diving in and talking about one of those subjects that, sometimes people have an easy time talking about, and sometimes people have a very difficult time talking about. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think sex and sexual freedom is pretty much, for a lot of people, it's a taboo subject, isn't it? It's almost kind of like a dirty subject or a giggly subject. There's lots of ways. And you're right, some people are just quite cool and relaxed about it. But in terms of sexual freedom, I think people don't often even know really what that means, do they?
Yeah.
It's kind of, or they have a misconception about what that means.
Well, what is sexual freedom? What does that actually mean?
Okay, well, the way I define it, the way I work with it is it's about the ability to have the choice. And I think that's the key word within this, is the choice to have a really fulfilling, satisfying sex life, in the absence of sexual dysfunction, guilt, and shame. And that means that people can choose to engage with people and have sex or not, but that when they do it, that they haven't got all these hang-ups and a lot of fear and anxiety that's kind of attached to kind of sex and sexuality a lot these days.
Yes. So I like how you say it puts a choice, and it really takes away the stigma as to, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, if you should, or, if you are, that it's fine. It can be whatever you choose it to be. And if you're not, that's fine too. It can be whatever you choose it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of pressure, isn't there, to have sex, and that's certainly not what this is about. But if you aren't able to, then that's something else entirely, and you want to. And also, sometimes sexual freedom is about empowering people to say no as well. That's just as important at being able to say yes when you want to, is having that kind of self-confidence to be able to say no to. And that's both of those are equally important, I think.
Yes. So how did you get started in sexual freedom? Like, you've been a hypnotist for the last 16 or more years. Has this always been your specialty since the beginning, or how did you stumble upon this?
No, I think like most specialities or specialties, they find you, don't they? You know, they kind of, you know, we kind of bring them to us, perhaps without even realizing it's that kind of journey. And where I started out was really working with fertility, and I had a lot of clients. Was working closely with some of the fertility clinics here in the UK, and basically what happened was a lot of those clients were having treatment or fertility treatment because they got sexual dysfunction. So whether that was, you know, erectile dysfunction or vaginismus in the case of women, which is the involuntary clamping of the muscles of the vaginal muscles, you know, I just kind of started working with that. And what happened, of course, was that if you can resolve the sexual dysfunction and then people are able to have sex, and they weren't needing their fertility treatment, you know, as often. So it was something that kind of really, it's like, oh. And then, of course, I also, the fertility treatment, I would see couples that were after that treatment and I just lost all connection. You know, I just kind of lost all connection. And, you know, it just kind of went from there. And, you know, once people kind of realized that I would work with those things and I started advertising that I did, then, you know, I got people from right across the realm of kind of sexual freedom, if you like. So I work with people within the kink community. So I'm registered as a kink-friendly hypnotherapist. I'm the only one in the UK at this moment in time. We need more. So hopefully we'll get more. I work with the lesbian, gay, bi and trans community. So everything to do with sexuality, sex, sexual dysfunction, sexual function, because obviously that's what we're trying to promote. And just all the feelings and the stigmas and the kind of belief systems that people want to leave behind them. You know, maybe they've been brought up to believe sex is wrong, whatever it may be. So right away across the board. But that's how I fell into it initially, was working with fertility, would you believe?
Wow. Well, that's quite an interesting journey. And I would imagine that, so like what percentage of people that you work with are people who are coming to you for sexual dysfunction?
Well, I mean, I always say that, you know, everybody that I work with that's an adult, you know, they haven't got sexual dysfunction, but they're sexual beings. So if they're anxious, that will affect their sexual function, their desire, their libido, their, you know, body image, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of people that come specifically because they've got a sexual dysfunction or they're looking for a kink-friendly therapist, at the moment, it's going up and up and up. But at the moment, I'm around about the 60-40 mark. So 40% general clients, 60% my specialist area. But month on month, year on year, it just gets higher and higher. So at some point, I suspect it will be the mainstay, as in, you know, kind of 90% plus of what I'm doing.
Wow. So you mentioned that, and this is just an idea that popped in my head. So you mentioned that you are the only person in the UK that specializes in the kink therapy. As a hypnotherapist, do you certify other hypnotherapists so that they can do that? Or is that something that you're going to be working on?
It's currently part of the Sexual Freedom Hypnosis program, but actually, to really get a good background in that, I think they need to have more information. I think what that would certify them as like a kink friendly rather than kink knowledgeable, or, you know, or maybe even kink aware, and they're kind of different categories for that. And that certification, that kind of kink friendly therapist, is something that I'm looking at in doing in a much deeper way, because it encompasses so many different things. There are many flavors of kink. There's consent. There's, you know, what's abuse, what isn't. But generally, for a lot of people that are seeking a kink-friendly therapist, what they're actually looking for is somebody that kind of has knowledge, understands, and most importantly, doesn't judge them or doesn't assume that because they like to do something a little bit different sexually, that then is the reason for their anxiety, or there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what they're looking for. I know the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom actually contacted me yesterday looking for a kink-friendly hypnotherapist in Colorado. So I know they have nobody registered at the moment in Colorado. So there is an international shortage of people, and yet we know that the majority of people actually do engage in kink, albeit often they don't call it that. So even if you engage in a bit of spanking or a bit of bondage or whatever it may be in the privacy of your own home, then you would actually come under that umbrella. But, most people just don't even realize that they do, really. Right.
That makes sense. So I'm in my 50s. I think, I'm not sure where you are on the age scale, but, I'm kind of approaching that menopausal time. Do you find women who are, around that age dealing with menopause, do you find these are some of the people that come to you?
Yeah, that's another group that I work with a lot. And menopause is a really interesting thing. I'm just for clarity, I'm 46 in a couple of months. I'm definitely perimenopausal. You get the odd hot flash and all that kind of stuff. It's not fun. But one of the things that's often associated with menopause for women is loss of libido. Mm-hmm. And actually, we know that there is some correlation with that. I think men and women libidos kind of slow down as we get a little bit older. However, I think the menopause gets blamed for a lot of things, which actually is often just a particular time in a woman's life, often a time in a relationship. So if you think about often people's relationships that maybe have started in their late 20s and 30s, they kind of get to that point where there's lots of things going on. And for some women, if they've had children, their children are often leaving home at that point. There's often lots of changes. And actually, within relationships, sometimes you get a couple that kind of suddenly are on their own again and look at each other and realize they've completely disconnected. But then what happens? Lady goes to the doctor and they go, "Oh, you're menopausal, it's because of that." When actually it's lots of other things that...
Right. So she feels validated. It's like, I don't even have to deal with this.
Yeah.
If you find value in this personal growth related material, I strongly recommend that you sign up for your $1 trial to my Personal Growth Club. Just head on over to personalgrowthclub.com and get a whole month of premium Personal Growth Club video training materials, meditations. You also get 6 free hypnosis sessions that are valued at over $174, all for this trial of just $1. Even if you cancel, you can keep the 6 hypnosis sessions. That's my gift to you, and that's how confident I am that you are going to love Personal Growth Club. Go to personalgrowthclub.com and start your $1 1-month trial today.
Yeah, and it's that, I think for a lot of women, menopause, actually, I often talk to women that I see, they'll come in maybe feeling like because they're not fertile anymore, that they're somehow less of a woman, or, all of those kinds of things that can play into that, which then that's about self-esteem, isn't it? That's, and that then affects how a woman feels sexually. But often once I point out to them that often it's a time of real liberation. So they often don't have to worry about the possibility of getting pregnant anymore. If they haven't had children and were trying to, that kind of option then goes, which actually in some ways takes a massive weight off people's shoulders and can be a big relief. And for any woman, I think it's just a transition into a new part of her life. It's not the end of something. It's just part of that cycle, and it's start of something new. And once we start to reframe that, I think, often we see women's libidos come back again. And of course, there's the interesting thing where you get, a lady that comes out of a relationship that's been in, for 25 years and the menopause has been made, she has no libido, meets somebody new, hormones are still the same, and suddenly her libido's back with a vengeance. So we know probably it wasn't anything to do with the menopause, it was probably to do with the relationship. So there's all kinds of stuff that go on there.
Right. So is there any way a woman who feels like things are relatively good in that relationship that is dealing with those libido issues, is there any way that that couple can kind of find that connection again and get, I mean, is that something that you help people with?
Yeah, well, one of the things that really feeds libido is dopamine. When we're in the start of a relationship, we get these high levels of dopamine, and the reason we get that is novelty. So I think one of the things that really helps libido is to, one, make sure there aren't any kind of issues within the relationship. And it doesn't have to be big things. It can be, I talk a lot about appreciation. So if you feel appreciated by your partner and vice versa, it's those words of affirmation, isn't it, from the 5 love languages, where, I would always, tell people about, even if somebody just brings you a drink or a cup of coffee or a cup of tea to bed in the morning, just saying thank you is a massive thing. And often people stop appreciating the things that their partners do for them. And then, of course, what happens is their partner stops doing it. So, then it starts to kind of wave away that way. And then you're just kind of changing things up a bit. So that can just be in life, but also, a bit of exploration sexually, that communication, and really talking about what people want and what they need. And often, people will say they communicate well with their partner about sex, but actually often they don't want to upset their partner about sex and haven't said something, or worried that if they initiate a cuddle, that's the insinuation is that it will lead to something, lead to sex. And often it's about getting that intimacy back, that connection, and, doing the things that, you do at the start of a relationship where, there's much more of a prelude to all of that, isn't there? There's the whole dating thing, whereas, often further down the line, life's getting in the way, and it's trying to find time to connect, kind of physically. And, people just need to just take a bit of time for each other. And I think that's actually really important.
That's really good advice, taking time. And, because you took all that time in the beginning, that was there. And there's no reason why that would change as far as what your needs are later on in life. So that makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the issues that you've seen your clients face when they find themselves sexually repressed?
Okay. So so in terms of just a definition of sexually repressed, I guess, is that, people that are unable to express themselves sexually. And that can lead to sexual dysfunction, but not always. Sometimes it can just kind of make people very closed down, to the point, actually, sometimes that they don't even engage in relationships. They just kind of stay away from them. But, the kind of underlying things usually is guilt and shame. That's the two kind of the things that, I could uncover with clients time and time and time and time again. And that's often about what they've been taught, how they've been brought up with attitudes towards sex, whether that's within their home, within, a religion, sometimes. And also, sometimes we get that thing where I'll get people where they've waited until marriage to have sex, and then expect like this light to go off and everything's fine. But of course, if you've been telling yourself for years and years and years that you can't do that it's wrong, then even within marriage, obviously they're then kind of learning right from the very start. So it's not all fireworks, because we learn to be good at sex, don't we? We learn what our body's like and how we want to be touched and how to connect with a particular person. So that's often, giving people the confidence to do that, and also just to let go of that shame and that guilt that often that underpins so many sexual repression, sexual dysfunction, and all kinds of other things too.
Yeah, it's a shame that we're taught so many bad things there's so many negative connotations that it just makes it seem like a real dirty, evil thing for some people.
Yeah. And it's, it's interesting because historically that wasn't the case. You know, if you look back to Egyptians and Greeks and, you know, the kind of more ancient times, then sex and sexuality was much more open and accepted. And, you know, a lot of the kind of the views that we hold today around sex and sexuality kind of moved in with Christianity. And we're not knocking Christianity here in any way, shape or form. But that's where a lot of it came from, where people were starting to be told, for, you know, how they should do it, who they're allowed to do it with, that, you know, being homosexual, for example, was a sin. You know, all these kinds of constraints, and it had to be done in a certain way, and, you know, all kinds of stuff, that things, sexual practices that have been around for centuries were suddenly kind of, you know, outlawed. I don't know what the word is, but kind of suddenly all shrouded in this shame. And, you know, as we move through that, then, you know, a lot of those beliefs are still held today. And, yes, you know, we know that, you know, for many people, and, you know, they may want to hold on to those beliefs, but they also want a good sex life. So there has to be a compromise somewhere in the middle with that, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. So are there any tools or techniques that you find helpful in working with clients who are seeking sexual freedom?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of techniques, inner child often is a really profound one, just because a lot of our beliefs around sex, you know, come literally from the playground at school, don't they? You know, that's where we start to get a lot of misinformation. And one of the biggest things that I do with my clients is actually very frank education. And, you know, strange for kind of a hypnotherapist to say, because we think, you know, people often think they walk into our office and we put them into hypnosis. But actually, this is one of those specialities where we do kind of need to know where the client's at and what they think, because there are so many misconceptions about what good sex looks like. A lot of that's to do with the internet and the pornography that's on the internet. So to understand where somebody's at with that, actually, in this case, is very important. And, you know, so things like inner child, sometimes parts therapy. One of the things that I work with a lot with women is something I call yoni-directed hypnosis. And yoni kind of being a much more holistic, tantric kind of word for the vagina, but the whole kind of female reproductive space, if you like, sexual space that includes everything from the kind of the breasts right the way through the reproductive system, the heart, everything, where everything's connected, so that they can really make friends almost with their vaginas, because a lot of women are very afraid of their own vaginas. You know, they're very they've been taught they can't even say the words. They kind of point and look, you know, very uncomfortable.
down there,
yeah. And you know, and if they feel like that, then how they can communicate to somebody else how to respect them that way, first and foremost, and then how to please and pleasure them, you know. So things like that as well, you know, general confidence building stuff. So a lot of it is stuff that you would see, you know, people use in a general hypnotherapy practice, but applied in a very specialist way. But I love the yoni-directed hypnosis. That actually fell out of learning about gut-directed hypnosis, because it's, you know, it's the same kind of muscle that we're working with. So again, you know, it's something that, you know, we take, adapt, and hopefully make better, isn't it? That's how hypnosis evolves.
Absolutely. So the yoni directive hypnosis, it's a form of parts therapy. It's sort of like...
No, it's much more about directing. So it's getting the unconscious mind to take control of blood flow, sensation. For women with vaginismus, when I've done this with them, they're actually able to kind of visualize their own vaginal muscles and release them. So rather than... I'm not a big fan of, you know, when they talk about women using dilators to kind of open themselves up. And, you know, the thing that I point out, there's often when women come to me and say it's not worked, and I say, but it's out of context. You're not aroused, you're not comfortable, you're not relaxed, you're not connecting, either with yourself or with anybody else. So, to take a foreign object to try and open yourself up, it actually doesn't make an awful lot of sense, does it?
Yeah,
So,
no, it really doesn't. Hello, this is Victoria Gallagher. I hope you're enjoying listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. As a way of thanking you for listening, I'd like to offer you a one-time discount of 35% off your first order at hiptalk.com. Just go to hiptalk.com and enter the code podcast in the discount code area in your cart, and you'll receive 35% off your first order. Thank you so much for listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast.
So if they can have the
arousal begins in the mind.
Absolutely. So when you look at a lot of kind of clinical interventions for something like that, it's just about, trying to get the muscles to open up. And we know that women that have IVF with vaginismus, for example, and then give birth, that, everything opens up so the baby can come out. So we know that their bodies are capable of doing that. Naturally, and these women aren't being forced open when they give birth either. They're dilating in the same way that every other woman does. But with the kind of the yoni directed hypnosis, it's about women taking ownership, because often they've felt a lot of shame around their arousal, around their vaginas, around lubrication, around all of those kinds of things. And we get them to kind of welcome it and to see the power. It's a very powerful part of a woman's body, and to kind of really embrace that power that it gives them, that femininity. It's not just about sex, it's just about being a woman in its entirety, which is a pretty amazing thing, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
It truly is. So it's, I think, so really that's it. It's kind of it's a lot of kind of direct suggestion, of being able to kind of move sensation around the body as well. And that's really cool. One of the things that I often do with women that have vaginismus, I'll use something like an Elman induction with an eye lock, and then I'll kind of bring them out of it if I'll fractionate them, and I just give them a suggestion. Look how easily you locked and unlocked your eyes. Vaginismus suddenly seems a lot easier to deal with, doesn't it? And of course they're already in that kind of suggestible state, and they go, yeah, I did just lock and unlock my eyes, because they did it, didn't they? So essentially we're just going to move what they just did with their eyes somewhere else so that they can get the result that they want. And
that's ingenious. That's what a great technique. I mean, and starting with the induction and just showing them on kind of a, non-offensive body part.
Yeah.
And then, they can move that exact same sensation wherever they want it to go.
Yeah. I am a big fan of repurposing techniques that we've tried and tested in other areas. This is why when I talk about sexual freedom hypnosis, there are techniques like yoni directed hypnosis, for example, that, I guess could say are mine, but, they're based on things that I've learned in other areas, and then I've adapted them and mixed them up. And, so when I talk about sexual freedom hypnosis, there isn't one technique. There's a protocol that I follow. There's like a 5-stage protocol that we use, but, there's many techniques that can be used within that, depending on what the client needs. And, that's always it's what the client needs, isn't it? We kind of essentially, we serve the client, don't we? We use hypnosis to do that. We don't expect them just to kind of drop into a technique and all will be well, especially with something like this, because every case is so unique, and, everybody's story is different.
Oh, absolutely. So if somebody was going to want to book a session with you, first of all, do you do sessions online or just in person?
I do online and in person. Partly having a niche where there's not lots of us that at least advertise that we work in that niche. So I have clients literally from all over the world. So today I've had a couple of clients sat here in this office. I had a client, I had one from your neck of the woods actually today, and a client in Australia, and then I've got another client here tonight that's here. So it's it's quite an international thing now. I get people from all over.
Oh, yes. Well, you've definitely created a name for yourself in our hypnosis community as the expert in this. And I think that that's really, it's such an important part of life that so many people ignore. And I think, they just set it aside and put it aside. It's not important, but it is important. It's a big part of who we are as human beings. I mean, if it wasn't for our sexuality, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
So, well, thank you so much for all of your insight and your information into this area. So if somebody wants to book a session with you, they would go to sexualfreedomhypnosis.org. Is that
They can do. They can go .org or .com. So if they want me in particular, they can go to either. But we do have a whole series now of sexual freedom hypnosis practitioners, and the ones that are now certified are actually on the .org website. So if you go to sexualfreedomhypnosis.org, there is the whole, everybody that's trained and is doing it is listed on that website. So, so find them there. But if people want me in specifically, they can either go to KazRiley.com or sexualfreedomhypnosis.com.
Great. And you are also offering a little gift for our listeners today. So when you join the Hypnosis 24/7 Live Network, you're going to get a free $200 gift card. And what does that gift card what is that gift card good for, and how do they join this live network?
Okay, so the Hypnosis 24/7 Live Network is currently being hosted by several different hypnotists. We do all different kinds of shows. If they go to, in fact, I can give a link. If they can either join the Facebook group, which is, I believe it's at Hypno 247 Live. I can send you a link if you're happy to put a link on where they can click on that.
Absolutely.
And they can join the network and the Facebook group, and they get this $200 gift card, which is actually a hotel gift card, which can be used for discounts and sometimes in full for hotels, not just in America, but right across the world. So there's hotels there in Berlin, in Australia, you name it, it's there. I had a look the other day, it's just a nice thing to have, isn't it?
It is, especially if you travel and you like saving money.
Absolutely. We all like to do that, don't we?
We do. Definitely. So, well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Your Mind podcast. And if you were a listener of today's episode and you'd like to find out more about Kaz Riley, you can go to her website, KazRiley.com. And I think that it's a great thing that you're doing in the world, helping people, all walks of life, with this very important, very big issue that people have that can really, it can really knock the wind out of your sails if you're dealing with something like that. So there is help, and Kaz Riley is your girl. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being here, Kaz.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. And once again, be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast if not already. We can be found as Hip Talk on all our social media accounts. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course at hiptalk.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast, and you'll be instantly notified the moment the next podcast becomes available. Also, please be sure to leave a rating and a review to tell us how you're enjoying these episodes, and that way you're making a contribution toward others getting to share in this valuable information. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast, brought to you by HipTalk.com, Personal Growth Club, and HypnoCloud apps available at iTunes.